Good morning, children. Let's study English literature today. Grade 6, Unit 1 Meeting Cezanne. Sir Michael Morpurgo is an English author, a poet, and playwright. He is best known for his novels and stories for children, many of which have been made into films. Between the years 2003 and 2005, he was named Children's Laureate of the United Kingdom. He has won several awards for his work. Let's start. Flipping through his mother's book, a young boy named Yannick admires the beauty of the countryside of Provence, as painted by the master painter Cezanne. One summer, he gets the chance to go and spend time with his uncle's family who live there. Yannick soon begins to enjoy his stay, occasionally helping his uncle run the village inn. One day, there's a bustle at the inn for a famous man. The inn's best customer comes visiting. Who is this man, and why is there such a fuss about his visit? That evening, my cousin Amandine told me I had to do everything properly because their best customer was coming to dine with some friends. He lived in the chateau in the village, she said, and was very famous. When I asked what he was famous for, she didn't reply. Questions, always questions, she tutted. Go and fetch the logs. Whoever he was, he looked like an ordinary man without much hair. But I felt very pleased when the famous man ate one of my creme brulee. After the man and his guests left, we began to clear the table. I pulled the paper tablecloth off, scrunched it, and threw it into the fire as usual. Suddenly, Amandine went rushing past me. For some reason, she grabbed the tongs and tried to pull out the remnants of the burning paper tablecloth. But it was already too late. Then she turned to me. You fool, she shouted. You little fool. What? I said. That man who just left does a drawing on the tablecloth as a tip for Papa if he likes his meal. You went and threw it in the fire? He is the most famous painter in the world. Idiot. She was in tears now. Everyone in the restaurant stopped eating and went silent. Then Uncle Bruno came striding towards us, unlike his jolly self. What is it? He asked Amandine. It was Yannick, Papa, she cried. He threw it into the fire, the tablecloth, the drawing. Did you tell him about it, Amandine? Uncle Bruno asked. Did Yannick know that he sketches something on the tablecloth and leaves it behind for us? Amandine looked at me, her cheeks wet with tears. I thought she was going to lie, but she didn't. No, Papa, she said, lowering her head. Then you shouldn't blame him. Should you, for something that was your fault? Say sorry to Yannick now. She mumbled it, but didn't raise her eyes. Uncle Bruno put his arm around me. Never mind, Yannick, he said. He said he particularly liked his cream brulee. You made it, didn't you? So the drawing was for you. Really, always look on the bright side. For a moment, you held a drawing that was made for you by the greatest painter in the world. That's something you'll never forget. Later on, as I came out of the bathroom, I heard Amandine crying in her room. I hated to hear her cry, so I knocked on the door and went in. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to upset you. She had stopped crying by now. It wasn't your fault, Yannick, she said, still sniffling a bit. It's just that I hate it when Papa's cross with me. He hardly ever is. Only when I've done something really bad. I shouldn't have blamed you. I'm sorry. Then she smiled at me. I lay awake all night, my mind racing. Somehow, I was going to make it all right again and make Amandine happy. Soon I had worked out exactly what and how to do it, even what I was going to say when the time came. Next morning, I didn't go for my walk in the hills, but made my way through the village towards the chateau. I waited till there was no one about. I climbed the gates easily enough and then ran down through the trees. There, surrounded by the vast and threatening forest on all sides, was the old man with very little hair who had come to the inn. He was sitting alone on the steps in the sunshine and sketching. I approached as silently as I could, but somehow I must have disturbed him. He looked up, shading his eyes against the sun. "Hello, young man," he said. Now that I was close to him, I could see he was indeed very old, but his eyes were young, bright, and searching. "Are you Monsieur Cezanne, the famous painter?" I asked. He seemed a little puzzled, so I went on. "My mother says you are the greatest painter in the world." He smiled and then laughed. "I think your mother's probably right," he said. "You clearly have a wise mother. But why did she let a young lad like you come wandering here on his own?" I explained why I'd come and what I wanted. He looked at me with furrowed brows and said, "I remember you now from last night. Of course I'll draw another picture for Bruno. What would he like?" "No, better still, what would you like?" "I like sailing boats," I said. "Can you do boats?" "I'll try," he replied with a smile. It didn't take him long. He drew fast, never once looking up. But as he worked, he asked me about where I'd seen sailing boats, about where I lived in Paris. He said I loved Paris and sailing boats too. "There," he said, tearing the sheet from his sketchbook and showing me. "What do you think?" 4 sailing boats were racing over the sea out and beyond a lighthouse, just as I'd seen them in Brittany. But I saw he'd signed it as Picasso. "I thought your name was Cezanne," I said. He smiled up at me. "How I wish it was," he said sadly. Then he added, "Off you go now."